My name is Hannah Morgan, 36 years old, a lecturer in applied linguistics at a small university in Oregon. To my students and colleagues, I'm a serious, dedicated woman constantly busy with seminars and in-depth research on intercultural communication. But to my family, I'm simply the woman who still can't have children. A constant reminder, like a wound that never healed. I've been married to Ethan for 8 years. He's an accountant at a construction company, working at the main office in Portland. From the outside, people would say, we're a stable couple. A 2-story Pinwood house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and occasional weekend camping trips throughout the year. But beneath that facade, something wasn't right. I didn't see it at first, but looking back, everything was painfully obvious. Ethan started coming home late more often after last Christmas. At first it was because of year-end financial reports, then tax season, then never-ending special audit projects. I believed him, not because I was naive, but because I was too exhausted to be suspicious. I had just been nominated for an international research program, a chance that could elevate my work to a new level. I immersed myself in my projects, writing page after page, cross-checking linguistic data, while neglecting my own marriage. Brooke, my half-sister, suddenly showed interest in my love life. Someone who had never sent me a birthday card was now inviting me out for coffee, asking questions like, how are things between you and Ethan lately? Are you two thinking about having kids again? Sweet questions that left a bitter taste, forcing me to swallow down the lump of doubt in my throat. I just want you to be happy, Brooke said, squinting behind her latte cup, but I couldn't tell if that look was affectionate or calculating. I used to think I was overthinking until I noticed both Ethan and Brooke frequently checking their phones during family gatherings. Once, at my mother's birthday party, they both looked down at their phones and smiled, almost at the same moment. I blinked. They didn't look at each other, didn't touch, but the space between them suddenly felt strange, like I was the outsider in my mother's own kitchen. I used to laugh it off. They're probably looking at a meme or something. I made excuses in my head like someone desperately trying to hold on to the image of a stable family. But part of me knew that wasn't true. The chill in my spine whenever Brooke placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder as she walked past me. The way Ethan deflected when I asked about the new shirt I'd never seen before. Oh, my boss gave it to me. Every excuse made sense, if you were tired enough not to dig deeper. I had been too busy to notice the shift. The dinners where Ethan sat across from me with vacant eyes and empty conversation. I blamed work, stress, even my hormone cycles that had been erratic after 2 years of infertility. I thought once summer came, we'd take a trip, get away, and we'd be fine. I used to believe that. But now I know. The signs weren't subtle, they were alarms, loud as a fire siren in the middle of the night. I was just the only one pretending not to hear them. That morning, my university sent out a closure notice due to a snowstorm sweeping through western Oregon. Wind howled outside the windows, snow coated the balcony railing and blanketed the car roofs. I was supposed to stay at school to finish a report for the Federal Linguistics Research Conference, but for some reason that day, I wanted to go home. A vague instinct, like I needed to check if the house still breathed. I drove slowly through the snow-covered streets, the tires squealing slightly at every turn. As I pulled onto Maple Crescent, the first thing I saw was Brooke's deep red Ford Escape, parked right in front of my house. I almost waved, thinking maybe she'd just stopped by to visit, but then a cold, invisible hand crawled up the back of my neck and made me pause. Ethan hadn't mentioned having a guest. And Brooke had just texted yesterday saying she had to work overtime because her boss needed help auditing project files. I stepped into the house, boots still on, right onto the welcome mat. Something I had never done. No music, no TV, just silence, thick enough that I could hear the faint drip of melting snow falling from my sleeve. "Are you?" I called. "Brooke?" No answer. I held my breath, my ears straining like the tiniest sound could shatter a blood vessel in my heart. And then I heard it. A giggle. A woman's voice, familiar enough to make my stomach turn. I don't remember how I got upstairs, I just know my hand landed on the bedroom doorknob. The same room where I cried in Ethan's arms after 3 failed IVF cycles. Where I once dreamed of a crib by the window. And I opened the door. The scene before me erased every sound from the world. Ethan and Brooke, tangled in the gray silk sheets I had bought less than 3 weeks ago, their eyes wide and dazed. But I was disturbingly clear. "Well, isn't this something?" My voice came out calm, colder than the snow on the porch. What a surprise. They both shot up like they'd been electrocuted. Brooke grabbed the blanket to cover herself, face drained of color. Ethan stammered, "Hannah, I'll keep it simple," I said, locking eyes with my husband. "How long?" Brooke turned to Ethan, then dropped her gaze like a child expecting punishment. That silent bond between 2 traitors made me want to vomit. Ethan swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the floor. "Almost 2 years." I let out a laugh, sharp and hollow. "Wow. So while I was injecting hormones, tracking my temperature, praying every month that the bleeding wouldn't come, you 2 were sneaking around, having fun?" "I'm sorry," Brooke whispered, her voice sinking into the carpet. I No, that's right," I cut her off. "You didn't think, like when you told me to rest after my second miscarriage, then asked Ethan to take you to a wellness check 2 days later? Was that the time?" Ethan stepped forward, trying to place a hand on my shoulder, but I backed away. "Don't touch me." There were no tears. Only silence. As I stared at them, trying to grasp whether what I saw was real or some cruel distortion of memory. Then I turned, walked down the stairs and out to my car. I didn't grab a coat. I didn't bring my purse. I drove to a hotel at the edge of town and booked a room with nothing in hand. In that plain room, with a dull yellow lamp and a framed stock photo on the wall, I sat on the bed and let myself fall apart. Just for that night. Because by morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I stayed at the hotel for exactly 7 nights. I didn't respond to any of Ethan's texts or calls, nor did I open a single tearful message from Brooke. They messaged constantly, first with fear, then with apologies, then with excuses and blaming the situation. I didn't know it would go this far. We didn't plan anything, Hannah, it was just emotions. "Please, I know I was wrong, but don't cut me out." I didn't answer. They didn't deserve a word from me, not after I had buried my dream of becoming a mother in the same bed where they betrayed me. Instead of crying, I quietly organized everything in my mind, like rearranging a bookshelf after an earthquake. Old memories resurfaced, but no longer intact as I remembered them. They came back in distorted shapes, reeking of lies. The camping trip Ethan missed because of a sudden audit. My birthday dinner where he brought flowers from a colleague. The spa day Brooke insisted on because I needed to relax, then canceled last minute because she had a headache. I had been living in a carefully staged play. And the worst part was, I had believed it. On the 6th day at the hotel, while drafting a letter to decline a research project in Minnesota, a project I once thought would be the next step in my career, an email quietly appeared in my inbox. Sender, Global Language Center, University of Edinburgh. Subject: Official offer, visiting professor position, upcoming fall semester. I blinked, unsure if I had read it right. It was the job I had applied for 6 months ago, just to see what would happen. Back when I still believed Ethan and I would start a family and stay in Oregon for at least a few more years. I used to think I'd decline if I ever got the offer. But sitting there alone in that stuffy hotel room that smelled like old carpet, something in my chest lit up. Not hope. Escape. I read the offer 4 times. 3 years of work at one of the most prestigious linguistics departments in Europe. Housing provided by the university, full visa support and optimal research conditions. And most importantly, far away from Ethan, far from Brooke, far from everything that had rotted in my old life. I didn't reply right away. I printed the letter, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my wallet, right behind the ultrasound photo I had once treasured like gold. Just one time, a faint heartbeat. The doctor said it needed monitoring. 3 weeks later, I lost the baby. That night, I called Melissa, my best friend from grad school, now a lawyer who specializes in complex divorce cases. We met at a small cafe downtown. I sat down, pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and said, "I'm not here to ask whether I should get divorced. I'm here to ask what I need to prepare so I don't leave a single cent to the two people who stole years of my life." Melissa nodded without hesitation. "Good. That's the kind of question someone asks when there's nothing left to salvage." We talked for 2 hours. I took detailed notes, shared assets, house, cars, Ethan's retirement accounts, joint investment funds. Melissa warned me. Oregon is an equitable distribution state, not equal. If I could prove infidelity, I'd have the advantage. You help me build the case, I'll handle the rest. Then I called the university in Edinburgh. Yes, I'd be honored to accept the position. I'll arrange everything and arrive on time. My voice didn't tremble. In fact, it was eerily calm. I wasn't forgiving, not because I was bitter, but because I had once trusted with my whole heart. Forgiveness now wouldn't be noble. It would be permission for them to trample me again. They had their chance. Now it was my turn to rewrite the ending. 3 days after accepting the job in Edinburgh, I returned home. The Pinewood house on Maple Crescent now felt like a stage after a bad play. Everything still in place but stripped of meaning. Ethan heard the car and came out looking half guilty, half hopeful. "I'll be staying here until I finish the paperwork for Edinburgh," I said simply before he could speak. Ethan blinked. "Edinburgh? The university offered me a visiting professor role, 3 years." I walked past him into the house, leaving him frozen on the doorstep. I didn't need to act strong. Indifference and steady resolve unnerved Ethan more than any yelling ever could. He tried to be nice, doing laundry, cooking meals, talking about work, as if pretending things were normal would magically erase everything. I responded with polite nods, sometimes a shrug, sometimes a soft exhale. At the same time, I worked with Melissa every evening at the public library. She introduced me to a financial advisor named Angela Scott, who specialized in pre-divorce asset separation. Angela had a sharp northern accent, quick and no nonsense. "We'll sweep every cent out of Ethan's reach if you follow each step." I opened a new personal bank account at a separate branch with triple-layered security. I contacted the school in Edinburgh for details on international transfers, tax obligations, and advanced disbursements. I slowly sold off my investment shares that Ethan didn't track, transferring the funds in small discrete batches. The house was jointly owned, but Ethan didn't know I had already contacted a real estate agent in the UK who could help me invest in property under my name. I needed a place in Edinburgh that wasn't just temporary housing. It would be the new foundation of my life. At home, I still cooked dinner like always, even suggested we try marriage counseling. Maybe this was the shock we needed to reflect on everything, I said, looking him straight in the eye. And he clung to it, like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. For the first time in weeks, Ethan hugged me tightly, but I felt nothing, only emptiness. Good. It was the perfect rehearsal for leaving without regret. One afternoon, I called someone Melissa had referred, Nathan Cook, a private investigator. We met at a sandwich shop near the municipal buildings. I handed him a photo of Brooke, her office address, and said one sentence. "I don't believe my sister's relationship with Ethan is the only thing she's hiding." Nathan didn't ask why. He simply said, "I'll report back within 2 weeks." I wasn't the kind of person who jumps to conclusions, but I knew Brooke. She wasn't the type to stop once she'd tasted what it felt like to be in control. I used to think I understood my sister. Clearly, I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a lightly rainy evening, Nathan sent me a folder. I opened it in my study, the door shutting behind me like it was locking the past away. Color photos, sharp and clear, Brooke walking into a roadside motel off Highway 8 with an unfamiliar man. They entered at dusk, left early in the morning. The man even kissed her goodbye at the car door. I flipped through a few more pages. The man was Dean Campbell, the executive director of the department where Brooke worked. And, Nathan noted, he had a wife, 3 young kids, and lived less than 4 miles away. I wondered, did Ethan know? Maybe, or maybe not, but to me, everything was now clear. Brooke didn't love Ethan, she just loved the thrill of taking what belonged to someone else. I tucked the folder into a locked drawer, along with the property documents, financial plans, and the offer letter from Edinburgh. The plan was coming together. And no one, not Ethan, not Brooke, knew that the quiet woman in this house was about to disappear. On Saturday night, just as Ethan had finished cleaning the kitchen after dinner, a suspicious new habit he hoped would soften me, I set my teacup down and said, barely louder than a breeze, "You once said you wanted to start over. I think we might have a chance." Ethan looked up, hopeful. In Edinburgh, I accepted the job offer. And I think, if we moved there together, left all this behind, got away from everything that's happened, maybe we could really start fresh. I didn't hold his gaze for long, just enough to plant a little hope. Ethan was silent for a long moment, then nodded, voice rough. "If you're willing to give me a chance, I'll do whatever it takes." I smiled, half regret, half pity. He didn't know he had just signed away the last remnants of our old life. I began coordinating the plan like a wife trying to repair a marriage. I suggested selling the house, because we shouldn't carry painful memories into a new place. I proposed we sell off most of our belongings, because furniture in Edinburgh is expensive and housing will be covered by the university anyway. I even encouraged him to cash out his shares in the company. "You always said you were tired of being chained to that desk. This is your chance to start fresh with no strings." Step by step, Ethan followed, without question. Sometimes I looked at him and wondered, did he really believe he could bury everything he'd done just by moving to another country? The real estate market in Salem was hot. Our 2-story Pinwood house, with the long porch and backyard garden, was listed and under deposit in just 3 days. The offer was higher than expected. We moved into a short-term rental near downtown to handle paperwork. I kept my tone steady, warm, but not intimate, as if everything was gradually settling down, just enough to keep him within reach. At the end of each day, I tallied the assets sold, money pending transfer, and documents needing Ethan's signature. I always framed it carefully. We should consolidate everything into a single joint account for easier international transactions. Ethan murmured his agreement, eyes soft with misplaced trust. He didn't know the account was created by me, and I was the only one with access once we left the country. Then, one evening, I brought up legal prep. "You know," I said, swirling a glass of wine in my hand, "Scotland operates under a totally different legal system. We'll need to update our wills, financial power of attorney, and any documents tied to U.S. assets, just to avoid complications." Ethan chuckled, "No big deal. If you've got it covered, I trust you." The next day, I scheduled a meeting with Bridget, the attorney Angela had referred, an expert in temporary asset protection during relocation. We posed as representatives from the university's legal team, arriving in person to get Ethan's signature under the pretense of streamlining the immigration process for international faculty. I handed over each document, explained every line, and emphasized all the right phrases. "This is just temporary authorization in case I need to sign for us during the initial phase. This one protects the proceeds from liquidated assets, just in case of financial risk from either side." Ethan signed them all, didn't read them carefully. His eyes never left the small smile on my face. Every notarized document was another lock on the door he would never reopen, and I had no intention of unlocking it. I called Melissa right after the notary left. "Everything's done. Now we just wait for the right moment." Melissa didn't ask questions. We didn't need many words to understand each other. Ethan started imagining our future in Scotland. He looked at castle photos, read about whiskey culture, even bought a few books on old Scottish dialects. I nodded along, chiming in here and there, as if I were dreaming the same dream. But only I knew, this trip had no return ticket. 3 weeks before our departure, I began the final phase of the plan. All assets had been converted, the house was sold, the deposit fully received, Ethan's long-term investments cashed out after he temporarily withdrew to stay flexible while living abroad. His share in the company had been dissolved quietly, and the full payout, over $200,000, was transferred into the relocation prep account I had set up as a joint account. But only I held the primary password. Once everything was under my control, I scheduled another visit with Bridget, the attorney I had introduced to Ethan as a university legal representative, to come to the apartment and Finalize the last paperwork. Ethan wore a white dress shirt, clean-shaven, pen ready, like this was the day we would step into a new chapter together. Bridget presented the documents calmly. This is the financial power of attorney for the early period, while Hannah settles into her role. If any legal issues arise, the appointed party can act under Scottish law. Ethan signed. No hesitation. This one confirms the transfer of personal assets across jurisdictions, ensuring neither party is taxed twice, he signed. This is the international banking authorization, ensuring the joint account can be managed by a single party during the transition period. Signed. He asked only one question. Should I keep a copy? I smiled gently. I'll email you a scan. Edinburgh needs the original for submission to the Home Office. He agreed, fully trusting me. After the signing, I went into my study, opened my laptop and logged into the international banking system with the new account. It took less than 10 minutes to transfer the entire amount, over $780,000, into a personal account opened in Edinburgh under my name. I didn't rush, I moved as if I were packing the remnants of my legacy after a fire. In the joint account I left exactly $10,000. A number that was not random, 1,000 for every year I endured deception. From both my husband and the woman I once called my sister. I stared at the screen for a long time after the transaction was complete. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel regret. Just the quiet sense of closing the door to a house that once glowed warmly, but had been slowly burning for years without me noticing. That night, Ethan brought home pizza from the place he knew I liked. We ate in silence. Every so often he looked at me with hopeful eyes, as if I were slowly coming back. I picked up my glass of water and smiled faintly at him. I used to be very good at forgiving. So good that people thought I didn't know how to fight back. But this time, I wasn't silent to endure. I was silent to end it. After dinner, I went into the bedroom, locked the door, sat down and opened my laptop. I drafted an email, attaching full copies of the legal documents, transaction records, and limited temporary access to the joint account. Just enough for Ethan to see that everything was complete, and completely lawful. I scheduled the email to send at 8 a.m. the morning I left. I also drafted another email, sent to a select group, close friends, a few trusted colleagues, Ethan's parents and 2 of his closest associates from the company. Nothing heavy, just the truth. Brief, direct, composed. I'm writing this note to say goodbye before I leave for Edinburgh to start a new position. Ending this marriage was not easy, but it was necessary. I don't expect anyone to take sides, only to know the truth. Some things cannot remain buried, especially when they come from those closest to us. I'm okay, and I'm starting over. I didn't attach any photos or proof. Grown adults would understand the subtext. The last night before the flight, I stood watching Ethan sleep. He didn't know that when he woke up, I would no longer be there. And he didn't know that everything he thought was being repaired had already collapsed long ago, leaving only him clinging to the illusion. I closed the door quietly, as if I didn't want to wake my own past. On the morning of departure, I got up at 5 a.m. No alarm needed. My body was used to waking in silence. Ethan was still sound asleep when I left the room. I took a quick shower, put on the brown wool coat I had set aside for Edinburgh, and rolled my suitcase gently like I was heading out on a short business trip. He had no idea it would be the last time he ever saw me under that roof. On the way to the airport, I made small talk, asked a few questions about the moving plans. He spoke excitedly about how he'd contacted an international moving company that could start packing the next week. I met his eyes with a look of quiet approval. That's great, I'll secure housing over there and send you the address. He squeezed my hand, eyes shining, voice warm. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it. I looked at him. My eyes weren't angry. Just calm, like looking at an old shirt I once loved, now torn beyond repair. At the airport, he helped me with check-in, hugged me tightly at the security gate. I love you, Hannah. You know that, right? My lips curved slightly. I know. That was the last lie I ever told him. As the plane took off, I didn't look back. There was no emotional soundtrack in my head, just a strange stillness, and the feeling of relief spreading through my chest like a quiet cleansing agent. I arrived in Edinburgh that afternoon, the sky gently overcast, light rain falling on the cobbled streets. The university sent a car to pick me up at the airport and took me straight to the faculty apartment on the old campus. It was small but tidy, fully furnished, and peaceful. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I opened my laptop, connected to the internet, and launched my inbox. I clicked send on both pre-scheduled emails. The first email, to close friends, colleagues, Ethan's 2 associates and his parents, was polite but clear. I didn't lay out the details, but the recipients would understand where the truth lay. And they would ask Ethan questions. Questions he couldn't deflect. The second email was for Ethan. I kept it short, emotionless. Ethan, I'm not running away. I'm leaving a marriage you already destroyed long ago. I'm not doing this out of anger, but because I have no reason to stay. All assets have been handled in accordance with the legal agreements you voluntarily signed. I left $10,000 in the joint account, a parting gift for the years I once believed in you. I don't expect you to understand. I just ask that you do not contact me. Hannah. I hit send. Removed the SIM card from my phone, slipped it into a drawer. The next day, Melissa sent me a scanned copy of the legal correspondence from Ethan's attorney. The first message Ethan sent her was at 4:12 a.m. Oregon time. I don't understand what's happening. Hannah disappeared, so did the money. The account is locked. Her email says things I can't believe. Their lawyer tried calling, requesting a fair renegotiation. Melissa replied briefly, he signed all documents voluntarily, notarized with full consideration time, we're prepared to go to court if necessary. Ethan went silent for 3 days. On the 4th day I received an email with no sender name, just 4 words. You've already won. At the same time, I got a message from Carla, a former colleague of Brooke's at the law firm where she worked. Hannah, I haven't heard from you, but you should know, Brooke was just suspended. Rumors about her relationship with the director spread across HR. His wife filed for divorce with photos someone provided. They say it was an anonymous tip. I put the phone down, didn't smile. I quietly pulled out a small note from my wallet where I had once written a single line. Everything will fall apart, not by a hammer, but by the truth. I folded the note, placed it in a drawer, and opened the window. The autumn air in Edinburgh was crisp and clean. In the distance, stone towers stood tall beneath silver-gray skies. I didn't need to win. I only needed to let go. And I had just done that. Time in Edinburgh didn't pass quickly. It moved slowly, peacefully, long enough for each layer of pain in me to be peeled back gently, without rush. I began work at the university with a diverse group of international students, people who knew nothing about my story in Oregon. To them, I was just a sharp, composed professor who could make even the driest concepts come alive. It was here that I rewrote the research I once abandoned. Fractures in Intimate Communication, a linguistic and sociological analysis from lived experience. A dry title to outsiders, but to me it was the only honest thing left after years of living in sweet-tasting lies. The manuscript was completed after 6 months. A scholarly publisher in the UK responded positively and agreed to print it early next year. The editor told me, "You write like you're performing surgery on language and stitching the heart back together." During foggy afternoon tea breaks in the courtyard, I gradually got to know a colleague. Adam Whitmore, 41, a professor of American literature. He had a deep voice, unhurried, and eyes that didn't scan me for wounds like other men had. He just sat there, listening. We didn't start with flirting. We started with long conversations about Emily Dickinson, Toni Morrison, and conferences we both missed. Because we'd overslept, I told Adam what I had been through, not like a victim, but like someone who had walked through a storm and was now just rereading old journal entries on a rainy day. He didn't say I'm sorry, he just looked at me and said, "The way you walked through it, it wasn't revenge, it was rebuilding." We dated slowly, quietly, no shared photos, no rushed promises, just steady presence. At lunch, in evening reading sessions. In moments when I caught myself laughing without holding back. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman who once waited anxiously for an IVF result, who quietly wiped tears in the bathroom after a cold glance from her husband, who clung to belief in a man who, in truth, only existed in her imagination. That woman was gone. She wasn't me anymore. And I didn't grieve her. I used to fear becoming hard, cold. But I realized being steadfast isn't the same as being numb, and living with boundaries doesn't mean closing your heart. I no longer mentioned Ethan or Brooke in conversation. Not because they didn't matter anymore, but because they no longer had a place in my inner world. They stayed in a past chapter, and I had already turned the page. Occasionally I'd get updates from old acquaintances in Salem. Ethan had moved back in with his mother, no longer working at his old firm. Brooke had vanished from social media after being indefinitely suspended for ethical misconduct. Each was living the life they had chosen for themselves. As for me, I didn't choose the easy path. I chose the one that was true to who I am. One late afternoon, I stood by the office window as the winter sky dimmed into that cold light I used to fear. But now, it didn't make me feel lonely. On the contrary, it made me feel spacious, as if the world finally had enough room for me to breathe deeply. I held the draft copy of my book in hand, resting my forehead gently against the glass. Hannah's story wasn't just a journey out of a broken marriage. It was a reminder that true strength isn't in striking back, but in standing up, walking away, and rebuilding with your own hands. In a world where trust can be exploited, clarity, resilience, and self-respect are the greatest weapons. Hannah didn't just survive betrayal, she was reborn from it, and she kept going, fully in charge of her life. What do you think about Hannah's decision? Was she too cold, or did she fully deserve the freedom she reclaimed? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.